Longevity habits backed by research. The people living past 100 in the healthiest regions of the world are not taking expensive supplements, following extreme diets, or spending hours in gyms. And what they are actually doing is far more accessible than the longevity industry wants you to believe. Segment 1. What the science of long life actually reveals. The pursuit of longevity has become one of the most commercially exploited territories in modern health, saturated with biohacking protocols, pharmaceutical interventions, expensive supplementation regimens, and technological monitoring systems, marketed with the promise of extending life through complexity and cost. The research tells a different story entirely. The most comprehensive and reproducible data on human longevity does not come from clinical trials of novel compounds or the quantified self-experiments of technology executives. It comes from the systematic study of populations that have naturally produced the highest concentrations of centenarians, individuals living beyond 100 years, with the lowest rates of the chronic diseases that define premature death in the industrialized world. These populations do not share genetics. They do not share geography beyond their identification as regions of exceptional longevity. They do not follow structured exercise programs, count macronutrients, or optimize sleep through wearable technology. What they share are behavioral, dietary, social, and environmental patterns, habits practiced not as health interventions, but as the natural texture of daily life, that the research has now characterized with sufficient precision to identify the specific biological mechanisms through which each one extends healthy human lifespan. These habits are not complicated. They are not expensive. They do not require extraordinary discipline or the sacrifice of life quality in the service of life quantity. They require only the understanding of why they matter biologically and the consistent application that transforms understanding into outcome. Segment 2. The research-backed longevity habits. Habit 1. Daily natural movement integrated into life. The longest-lived populations in the world are not characterized by structured exercise regimens. They are characterized by environments and lifestyles in which moderate physical movement is an unavoidable feature of daily existence. Walking to destinations, tending gardens, performing manual household tasks, navigating terrain rather than flat engineered surfaces. This distinction matters profoundly because it reflects the difference between exercise as an isolated behavioral intervention and movement as a continuous biological state. Research on sitting time and mortality demonstrates that the health consequences of prolonged daily inactivity are not fully counteracted by structured exercise performed in isolated sessions, meaning that the pattern of movement distributed across the entire day produces longevity benefits that the pattern of intense exercise followed by extended sitting does not replicate. The biological mechanisms are well characterized. Continuous low-level movement maintains the lipoprotein lipase activity that regulates triglyceride clearance and cardiovascular risk. It sustains the endothelial shear stress that drives nitric oxide production and arterial health. It preserves the insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism efficiency that decline with sedentary behavior. It maintains the musculoskeletal capacity and proprioceptive function that govern functional independence across the later decades of life, the period during which the quality of longevity is most determined by physical capability. Walking as the primary daily movement modality appears consistently across the longest-lived populations, not as structured cardio sessions, but as the natural means of navigating daily life. Research on step count and mortality demonstrates a dose-dependent inverse relationship between daily steps and all-cause mortality that plateaus at approximately 7,000 to 8,000 steps per day for older adults, a threshold achievable through lifestyle integration rather than dedicated exercise. Habit 2. A plant-predominant whole food dietary pattern. No single dietary prescription characterizes all longevity populations. They consume varying proportions of macronutrients and include different food traditions reflecting their cultural and geographic contexts. What they share universally is a dietary foundation built predominantly on minimally processed whole plant foods, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, fruits, nuts, and seeds, with animal products consumed in modest quantities as complements rather than foundations of daily intake. The biological basis for plant-predominant dietary patterns and longevity operates through multiple simultaneous mechanisms. The fiber content of whole plant foods nourishes the diverse gut microbiome, whose metabolic activity produces the short-chain fatty acids that reduce systemic inflammation, maintain intestinal barrier integrity, regulate immune function, and influence the epigenetic expression of genes governing cellular aging. Research consistently demonstrates that gut microbiome diversity, directly dependent on dietary fiber variety, is one of the strongest biological correlates of healthy aging across populations. The phytonutrient density of varied whole plant food consumption provides the antioxidant and anti-inflammatory compounds that reduce the oxidative stress and chronic inflammation, most directly driving the accelerated cellular aging that produces the chronic diseases defining premature death. Polyphenol, carotenoids, flavonoids, and organosulfur compounds found exclusively in plant foods activate the NRF2 pathway, the master cellular defense and longevity-associated regulatory system, and the sirtuin proteins most directly linked to the cellular mechanisms of aging. Caloric moderation, eating to approximately 80% of fullness rather than satiation, appears consistently in the behavioral descriptions of longevity populations and aligns with the extensive research on caloric restriction and longevity spanning multiple model organisms. The biological mechanism involves reduced mTOR activation, the cellular growth and aging pathway that, when chronically overstimulated by excess caloric intake, accelerates the cellular aging processes most associated with shortened healthy lifespan. Habit 3. Purposeful social connection and community, the most surprising finding in longevity research. Surprising specifically because it receives the least attention in commercially oriented health communication, is the extraordinary magnitude of social connections' independent effect on lifespan and health span. A landmark meta-analysis examining data from over 300,000 participants across multiple countries documented that adequate social relationships were associated with a 50% increased likelihood of survival across the study period, an effect size exceeding that of physical inactivity, obesity, excessive alcohol consumption, and approaching that of smoking as an independent mortality risk factor. The biological mechanisms through which social isolation produces premature mortality are multiple and operate across every major physiological system. Chronic loneliness, the subjective experience of social disconnection, activates the same neural threat response as physical danger, maintaining sustained sympathetic nervous system activation, elevated cortisol, heightened inflammatory signaling, and the endothelial dysfunction that drives cardiovascular disease. It impairs immune function through the direct neuroimmunological pathways connecting the social brain to immune cell regulation. It accelerates cellular aging, measurably shortening telomere length, the chromosomal caps whose erosion is one of the most direct molecular markers of biological aging. Longevity populations do not treat social connection as a leisure activity that follows the completion of productive obligations. They embed it structurally within daily life, through shared meals, multi-generational household or community living, participation in religious or civic organizations, and the organic social contact that dense community living and pedestrian-oriented environments naturally produce. The connection is not scheduled. It is continuous, and the biological benefit it produces operates through that continuity rather than through episodic social contact that modern life typically provides. The science of longevity does not point toward a pharmaceutical breakthrough waiting in a laboratory or a biohacking protocol accessible only to those with exceptional resources. It points consistently, across decades of population research and mechanistic biology, toward habits that have been practiced by ordinary people in ordinary communities for generations. Habits so simple that their power is easily underestimated by a culture conditioned to equate complexity with effectiveness. Move naturally throughout the day. Eat predominantly whole plants in modest quantities. Invest in genuine social connection as a biological priority rather than a social nicety. Cultivate purpose and practice deliberate stress reduction. Protect sleep with the seriousness its biological function demands. Moderate or eliminate alcohol. These habits do not guarantee the extraordinary lifespan of a centenarian, but they represent the closest approximation to a research-validated longevity protocol that the current state of human knowledge can honestly offer, and they are available, beginning today, to virtually anyone willing to apply them. The longest-lived people in the world are not waiting for a better supplement. They have been living the answer all along.